We will now do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And next is invitation to speak. And we do have an audience member. Do you have anything to say? No? Not now.
Not now.
Okay, and next is the approval of the warrant. And I came by, was it yesterday?
Yesterday.
All the days just one together. And did look everything over. It was actually pretty quick, too. So could I have a motion to approve warrant 17-16S?
So moved.
And could I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Roll call, please.
I, Barbara Steffen. I, Kitty Dugan.
I, Gina Stino.
I abstain, Ellen Mar. I, Amanda Zani.
This is very helpful.
This is just the handouts from the, committee training. It's not anything that, frankly, you need to read,
But good to have.
I thought I would circulate.
Thank you, you beat me to it.
And that's just something related to sped stabilization.
Okay. And Jane had indicated to me that she probably would be missing from this meeting also. I think she has another debate tonight, I believe, so.
Yes, the debate team is at Bridgewater Raynham.
Is what?
At Bridgewater Raynham.
Oh,
Oh my gosh.
wow.
Carolyn had said that she had a rotation of other students.
Yeah.
Given the storm that we
Yeah.
had, I think it was very difficult to schedule,
Yeah.
and it was a half day today, so
Yep. Okay, so
I
that's
give a
fine.
forgiveness clause.
Maybe for next time. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is finance.
Okay. So I guess to start with the finance part of it first, the cover page has revolving funds and grants. There's nothing remarkable happening right now. We have started to collect some money for full-day kindergarten. We're pursuing that as the second payment we do now. One quick note about grants. You see a couple of negative numbers when it comes to the balance in the far right-hand corner. It really is a timing issue. On February 6th, we got a total of $225,876 in grant payments that came in. So those will be posted. I'm sorry, we got $124,203 in grant payments.
124.
124,203
Okay.
for grant payments on February 6th. That other number that I gave you was actually a number of other amounts that we had received that don't come to the school. I just had come across the fact that we got our Chapter 70 money, which is $184,000, and that came in January. As compared to the local receipts, undesignated government aid, which is $41,222.
I'm sorry, I
So
didn't-
clearly,
How much?
Chapter 7, 41,223, so clearly Chapter 70 is the big number
Okay.
when it comes to monthly payments from the state.
John, I just had one quick question.
Sure.
On the athletics, there was a pretty big jump in terms of the expended from end of December to January, end of January. It was like $33,000. Was that most likely stipend payments for fall athletics, just from a timing perspective?
I will have to look it up.
Okay.
It's the
I
second, the coaches get paid in 3 installments,
Okay.
beginning, middle, and end of the season, so the second payment, I think, was done in
Okay.
January. Because season started, the end of November.
Okay.
So, can I ask a question about the full-day kindergarten,
Mhm.
tuition? Do we send bills out to everyone for the second half payment?
It's handled by Osgood, and yes, they contact parents, so they know that there's a second payment.
Okay.
Payment reminder.
Yeah. Looks like almost $65,000 came in month over month, so the money's rolling in.
Yeah,
Um,
Yep.
just a question about the process.
And the collection rate for the first half was really quite good, so I'm not
Good.
anticipating a problem.
Very good.
I think last year was where the second payment, there were some stragglers,
Yeah.
but I'm hoping that process-wise, Lisa and Judy are kind of following up and following through from a payment perspective.
I wasn't here for last year, but I
Yeah.
understand it was an issue, and I think the message got through.
I know they definitely send reminders, that they send you a reminder that the payment's due, and then if you don't pay, you get a different colored slip in your folder
gonna say,
reminding you to
That would be another color.
Don't ask me why I know that.
Yeah, there's a pretty automated, a pretty mechanical process that goes with collection.
We actually had a higher balance at the end of January last year than we did June this year.
Oh, in terms of the actual balance?
Yeah, in
Yeah.
full-day kindergarten, we're at 385.
We're paying a couple more positions though out of it than we
Mhm.
were last year at this point because we added that 1.5 of paraprofessionals, so, okay.
Right.
Thanks, Jen. That was it that I had on the cover sheet.
Any other questions? No?
I guess the only, it was more of a question / observation on, back to general ed transportation. It looks like we've, maxed out what we're paying out of the operating budget, so now we're turning on.
Now we'll turn over and start to pay it out of the revolving fund.
Okay. At some point, I'd love to see a roll forward on the transportation account. Over the summer, Marge had indicated that she had concerns about that account in terms of, the forecast for this year. I think she was forecasting an ending balance of around $10,000, which was one of the lower ones. I can't
The ending balance.
see that happening.
So actually, the ending balance for the transportation fund was just fine on 6/30. I think the question that
She was talking about the forecast for this,
Yeah.
rolling forward for this June. She was concerned not about the last balance, but June 30th, 2017's balance.
And I think the question that's out there, I'm not anticipating it to be a disaster. I think the question out there though is when we changed the due date of payments, did that affect the timing of the money we received? Because that revolving fund runs as a cash. We don't do accrual accounting?
Yeah.
So, apparently last year we had a change in when we asked for payments. And so did we move some of those payments that normally would have come in after July 1st that would have flowed into this year into the previous fiscal year?
Last year's timing was the same as the year before, so I don't think there was, we had more late payments
Okay.
last year in terms of payments for this year. The timing of having it due June 1st or whatever it was
So that
the
was the
same.
same?
It was the same.
Okay.
And starting, we're at, whatever it is, like $88,000 as a balance. Last year at this time, we were at $84,000 as a balance, so it feels like we shouldn't have a problem, but it's just,
It
it's rattling
feels-
around my head, that comment that she had made, and I just wanted to.
It feels like it's on par with last year, it really does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we will start to pay, out of the revolving fund. The other thing that will start to happen is we'll start to use relatively soon money out of the appropriation to pay for out-of-district sped costs. We've been paying that out of the circuit breaker account
Yeah.
up until now.
anything else that's gonna start hitting transportation revolving besides just the bus driver salaries? Like the maintenance account still has money in it, so.
Maintenance account still has money in it. You know, we will have some maintenance expenses. There's the preventive maintenance that we do. There's the inspections that the buses go through. In fact, last Sunday, while I was sitting home looking at the weather,
Yeah.
Missy and your mechanic Chris were driving a bus up to Kingsborough, so that they could take that bus
Yep.
out of service, so they could do some repair work up at New England Transit. And nothing major, but some nagging issues that have gone on over some electrical problem, which we can't resolve here. When they finish it, they will bring it back to us and take another bus up to deal with a heater that's not working right now. The heater needs to be repaired.
Okay.
That should happen next week when we're not in school, so not having that bus here is gonna be an issue.
Okay, great, okay.
Any more questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. We can move along.
Um, Looking at the summary report of the budget, it doesn't look remarkably different than last year. We're within 1 percentage point of the spend rate from last year to this year.
Mhm.
I mean, I think there is a question out there as to what we're actually gonna wind up spending on utilities this year. And some assumptions were made about the cost of utilities, and in fact, in some cases, the budgets were lowered. Now, that was in anticipation of some lower energy costs. And we're really just starting to see the effect of the winter season. So, stay tuned to see how that turns out. I'm not suggesting that it's a big problem. It is really to say I don't know how that's gonna
Right.
look. Because we went into this with some more than valid methodology as to predicting how much we'd use. We're gonna find out if that was accurate.
Yeah. Well, all you need is 3 weeks of bitter cold weather and having to keep the heat on around the clock, and
Well, that's
that
right. I
totally
mean,
skews
you know,
things.
that little stretch we had a few weeks ago where we were down in the single digits, the buildings were heated 24 hours. I mean,
Right.
there wasn't a setback on it, and in fact, the main hallway upstairs where we had a sprinkler pipe freeze a few years ago, they took ceiling tiles out so that more heat would go up into that area.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, they were certainly very proactive in terms of dealing with it, but nonetheless, those are the sorts of things that, it's expensive.
Right.
Well, and some of the fact that we're running at 46% of budget versus 36% last year, year-to-date on utilities is because we reclassed trash. I mean,
That's part
there
of it.
is a portion
Yeah.
of that
Yep.
percentage that's, where you look down at cleaning and contract supplies, we're at 47% versus last year we're at 60%, and it's just the moving of the trash line.
Yeah, I think overall, when you look at the budget as a total, it looks fine. And again, I'm just suggesting, I think that's something we'll be looking at as we go into the next couple of months to see how that turns out. And we've made some assumptions on next year's budget, based upon what, not on actual use from last year, but on what we expect to use for this year. That's all.
Yep. Good.
And then finally, you have the maintenance report for the buses,
Yep.
and things are going just fine. I mean, I almost hate to say that. I think Katie knows.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think Katie knows. A couple of weeks ago, we had one of our own buses had to go to South Shore Auto Body because we had an issue with the back door.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it was gonna be one of those things that was either gonna cost $1,000 to fix, or $150. And it turned out to cost $150 to fix it.
Right.
So things have broken our way this year.
Yes.
Let's hope that continues.
No pun intended. Things have gone well,
You know, it's the power of positivity,
so.
the law of attraction, it's all good.
It's that quote by Yogi Berra, the harder I work, Look at it that way.
Yep.
Exactly. The more we scrutinize it.
Right.
$220 a bus for brake jobs was money well spent.
Yeah,
So-
and that was to inspect them and adjust them.
Yep.
Yep.
We didn't find, and while they were there, obviously, they looked the buses over thoroughly and didn't really come up with anything that they thought we should be concerned about.
So outside of the two lease buses that are going back and forth to NET, is there anything else that's gonna happen over Fed break? Is there-
No.
Okay,
No scheduled maintenance for any of the other buses.
so one was a heater and the other was an electrical, tracing an
Electrical.
electrical issue.
Electrical issue that deals with an alarm on one of the doors.
That has been a familiar problem with those buses.
Yeah, and then the other is, there's a heater in the back of the bus has just stopped working. Don't know what it is, don't know what the problem is, they're gonna fix it.
Okay.
Probably a fuse.
It's more than that apparently.
Yeah, you never know. Sometimes you think you figured it out.
Could be.
Keep us posted.
Yep.
If-
It'll be on next month's report.
If it's anything major, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Hopefully they just take it and repair it and send it back. We're just so fortunate that Missy was able to schedule it so that it doesn't affect anything.
Yeah.
In about 3 weeks, sports seasons turn over, but if we're in any tournament play, the buses get very, very busy. And so,
Right.
it's important to get it taken care of now, when
Right.
it's not going to affect the schedule.
Yep.
You are in turn, You've got at least 3 teams.
And we start to go on the road soon,
Mm.
yeah.
Right.
Anything else on, bus maintenance, vehicle maintenance? Okay. So next is a big discussion.
So the next order of business is the budget. Let me start by saying I asked your indulgence if you see any mistakes in there. When we went home on Wednesday, I didn't think I'd be home for 3 days.
True.
So there's an awful lot of effort that goes above and beyond on the part of this administrative team as well as poor Jennifer in the office in getting this all together and put out. You have, actually you have two documents. You have the budget itself.
Yep.
And then a separate sheet of paper
Yes.
Yep.
that has what we anticipate to be for employees next year, paid for through the grant revolving fund.
And thank you for that. I said thank you before, I'll say thank you again. That piece of visibility on the 24 employees that are funded out of revolving and grants kind of completes the picture so that we understand the two sides of the equation.
And I think you've been trying to figure it out as well, and I think we have essentially the same number, maybe a rounding error.
Yeah, so I did go through the exercise and I haven't shared it, but it's, I took the FTEs in the operating budget and I
Mhm.
added in the FTEs from the grants and revolving, and then I compared it to what we had reported out last year in our budget book, and I did have to make a couple slight changes, like we didn't, we added the 2.8 ESPs for the pre-K 1-on-1. So there were a couple of tweaks I had
Yeah.
to make to get us to an FY17 actuals number, and honestly, I declared victory. We were off by a 0.5 here in ESPs and I think a 0.7 in teachers, but compared to previous years where we were scrounging for the information, it was in really good shape.
It was a lot less painful.
A lot less painful.
And I think partway through the year, we did add
For us anyway.
.4, in the pre-K program for a student that came in. And we
Yeah.
talked about that at committee.
Right.
Yep.
And I, actually, because of working with the superintendent, we had some people that we were talking about as being .5 teachers, but they're really .67 teachers
Yep.
because they're teaching at halftime.
Right.
So that may be part of it as well.
Yeah, I suspect that some of the point whatevers that we had last year were maybe not as precise as they are this year, which is not again, I declared victory in terms
Good.
of rounding, so.
And again, what we did is we went through the payroll, and anybody who gets a check, we figure they're working for us. And, so was it a full-time or part-time employee, and then what was the funding source?
Yep.
And that's where that information came from.
Yep. We're in good shape.
Good.
All headcount and salary accounted for, which was
Yeah,
awesome.
no, that's great.
So what's your pleasure in terms of dealing with the document you have in front of you?
Well, first I want to add more positive comments. I really like the way the strategic plan has been tied to the budget and is included here. And it's great that we have a technology plan executive summary because we are midstream in implementing
Mhm.
that. So we really need to make people aware of where we are in that process. When we're looking for money to implement these processes to aid in the education process here, it's very important.
We're also hoping that these 2 pages will be implemented in the town report. I know the town report right now, as John shared with me, is dated, description of the school administration.
Right.
So hopefully these 2 pages can be incorporated.
Right. And we used to have, there used to be a letter from the superintendent in there, and it seems to have gone away
In here?
no, in the town report.
In the CAFR?
In the what?
No, it's a profile document.
There's the town report, and then there's also
Last-
the
No,
I forget what CAFR
in
stands
the
for.
book that gets
The annual
published.
report.
In
The
It's
annual
published every
report.
year.
Right,
Yeah.
but I don't believe there was one last year, and there may not have been one the year before.
There was one the year before.
Okay, so it would be great, and you could incorporate some of this in there too.
I think, I talked with Chris and Mary Gallagher, the CAFR, which is the financial report that the accountants give, is very soon to be approved.
I was
and then-
gonna say, that was on an agenda that I saw
think-
recently.
I think it was for last
Was it
night,
last night?
and then from
Yeah.
that, once that's approved, they'll go and they'll build the annual report from that. So, we're still, if I can get a copy of the CAFR, I will, I'll circulate it, cause it basically has all the information of the annual report,
Mhm.
except for some of the letters and other packaging, that goes into that.
Okay.
In terms of pleasure, I think to quickly flip through this,
Okay.
I know there isn't a huge audience here tonight, but I do think it's important to kinda go through it, 'cause not everybody's heard the story or heard all the work that's gone into it, so I think we'll replay for our TV audience and the 2 people that are here tonight. And then, is there a plan for building principals to come in at some point?
Yes,
Okay.
there is, and I think that's our next meeting.
Okay.
That they do come in and explain their budget.
Okay.
I think it's important to recap that, this is a culmination of many, many, many hours and conversations. And very difficult conversations, where, there is no fat in this budget. We worked very hard to keep that line, until a few hours ago, and we still have till midnight. We are still receiving column change notifications. They look like fan mail at this point, the last few days. And they've earned it, I mean, the teachers have earned it, but, it is impacting the salary line. I don't know how many, but I wanna say more than a dozen.
Okay.
So, there are quite a few movements, great courses, great learning, but it is a budgetary impact. So I don't wanna minimize that. I do wanna make a correction, page with the, enrollment and class size projections.
Yeah.
You have a number missing under the middle school, so the projected should be 485, and you don't have it there.
On the column.
Or 385, I'm sorry.
On the column changes, if it's possible for the March first meeting, if we could have a total of what the column change impact was to the overall budget, that would be great. We've been tracking it now for 2 years, so we know what our 16 baseline was, we know what we had anticipated for 17. It'd be nice to know,
You mean the cost of the column changes?
yes, just the column changes,
I
exactly.
think you're going to be stunned.
Well, we were at $68,000 in FY16, so
Of increases?
yes, of column change increases. Last year we had
It's less than that right now.
anticipated $55,000. We've been running it. Long gone are the years where we were running at $30,000. It's been double that for 2 cycles.
I think online technology and classes have made it easier for
Well,
people too.
There have been
Yeah.
a couple of initiatives that have been very, very worthwhile. One of them was the courses in Wilson training. So we have 10 people in that, and that's 9 credit hours in and of itself. That has an impact, but it's a very positive impact that our children are reaping the benefits directly. We also have technology, and to their credit, teachers have embarked on learning both of those, so
Yeah.
it's to their credit. It's just costly.
I'm sorry, and what was the middle school change, the number you had?
The projected sections, you do not have a total.
Oh, okay,
It should
sorry.
be 385.
Okay.
Probably put my calculator away.
Yeah.
It's trying to align those blocks.
Overall, the budget that you have, or we propose right now, that's before we deal with these column changes that we are really just finding out in real time, meets the number that the town is suggesting. So
Okay.
we're at that number, no variance up or down. There are no decreases in staff. There is one addition, and that is a technology
Technology
assistant.
assistant.
Somebody to deal with really sort of help desk kinds of issues. As Ron Menard pointed out, we now have over 1,600 devices in the schools, and the time has come that we need somebody to help with them. That is the only, at this point in time, a staffing change in this budget.
And that was a deferred request from last year. Ron and Bart had asked last year for that additional IT help desk person.
Right.
We had deferred it last year because we hadn't completed the rollout. We now are complete rollout at elementary and so close at the middle high school.
We
And we'll be
also-
there next year.
Wonderfully close.
We also had several positions that were delayed from last year, but we've managed to rearrange how we deliver services and have managed to put them in. So, as we mentioned last time.
Great.
And to our advantage, there's a slight decrease in the middle school. I think it's going from 7 to 8, so that our decrease is enough so that we have flexibility within the personnel. And we can accommodate. We have not decreased any of the services to children, actually we've increased them. So,
I like the flexibility that we've shown in terms of reconfiguring our staff to allow us to deliver the services where the need is, and better said, probably following the need with the services. In terms of those deferred requests, I think it'd be just important for people to understand just what those were that we were able to accommodate.
one was a transition person at the middle high school, and that is a transition for students who, for one reason or another, cannot attend school on a regular basis.
Yeah.
That's to acclimate them back into the curriculum, and that's been arranged through rearranging how and where we put our ESPs. That's been one huge change. The other was looking at the Walker, Schilling laws.
Schilling law.
And I wanna say Walker report, what is it again? It's Jim Schilling.
He used to work with Walker, that's why I forget. Schilling's law. high school. And in looking at that, we realized that we needed to have a special education person added to that. So we reconfigured where and how we utilize our ESPs, and did manage to find space for that and money, obviously. Also, in that same vein, to accommodate the social studies special ed combination. So it's looking at the expertise of our staff and how we need to rearrange it, and using our inclusion model, which we're moving forward with, minimizes the number of hours that are one-to-one outside the classroom. So given our changes that are very positive, and given the increase that we have in coming into the middle school, I have to give credit to the principals who were very creative and innovative, and looked at what the children's needs were first. And we accomplished it, which was amazing.
And the just for the TV audience, the co-teaching model that was proposed under the Jim Schilling Law report for the middle high school student services was, we're looking at implementation for just 6th and 9th next year.
It's being phased in at this point.
And it's just for English and math.
English, math, grade 6 and 9.
Okay. Great. So the transition services ESP was a deferred request that we've been able to reconfigure staffing to accommodate, and as was the social studies sped, because we knew that that 10th grade class was a big one.
Right.
It's the 10th grade. And then the co-teaching model, that's a new concept that came up due to that independent report.
Right, and the training has already taken place, and the teachers and co-teachers are already training. So they're ready to go.
Okay.
That's great.
There are wonderful movements. I think that when John and I spoke about the budget as well, it was important that we didn't neglect some of the things that might impact this budget still, that's not quite settled. And that is that Centrex is going to be, may reduce our phone bill, our phone expense, which is a positive, our new phone system. Also, the number of column changes are not definitive yet.
Yep.
That may be a negative. Certainly not gonna be a positive as far as expense. We do not anticipate any retirements at this point. And usually at this point, we start looking at retirements as to hiring, and we don't see any, we don't foresee any change at that point. There's also we don't know what the bottom line for state and town funding is, so that's still in the House and being played with in argument stage. There's also, we're not sure about our federal or our state grants at this point. We don't receive them until later. We anticipate that the federal grants will remain. However, we do have a very new administrator in the Department of Ed.
It's a nice way of saying it.
As we do with a new administration. So with that comes the new philosophy of ESSA, the Leaving No Child Left Behind to Every Child Succeeds, which has new target points and new philosophies, and we don't know what that will look like. Commissioner Chester, in his address this month, said that we are not mandated by the federal government, but we have our own. However, we all know that when mandates come, they come from the federal government, and it will hold money if not complied. So we have to balance the two. At this point, I remain Pollyanna optimistic, but we don't know the impact. So it's important to look at that. Also, the federal grant for Title I is recalculated by not using the free and reduced lunch. In the past, we've had the option of using one or the other,
Yep.
economically disadvantaged. At this year, it is strictly economically disadvantaged, which means that it is state regulated and state documented. It has no impact on children who have free reduced lunch. So that may impact for us, it may lower the amount that we get, we don't know. There are all these variables, and it was important for us to articulate those. But we have been, I wanna say, frugal, and we have certainly been, and I look at the profile and looking at a bring your own device initiative has certainly been not only beneficial in keeping us up to date in what comes into the classroom for devices, but also realistic for children, but also cost efficient. So that's very important. We have also looked at the fees to be realistic, and we've raised them minimally, but they have helped. And that the Learning Commons and the Stabilization Fund, and the library at Deer Hill and the Learning Commons that's going into the high school has been a tremendous fundraiser that has helped us. It hasn't come out of the building fund, so we thank the Cohasset Education Foundation for those. And already we have the stabilization fund that was established last year, which we will not have that large impact in June. So those are all still variables. And the thing that we've both discovered, or I've discovered, is budgets remain fluid until town meeting. So,
Right.
there are all those unknowns still.
On the federal grants, it's IDEA and Title I.
We have Title I,
Yeah.
which is based on economically disadvantaged, and it is we have a targeted school
Yeah.
at present, and that is Deer Hill. Our, my drive is to extend it to Osgood next year.
Yeah.
We really have to look at what the figures are, how we can do that and evaluate them. So I'm working with our consult on the state to try to do that for the literacy. Our other federal grant is the Title IIA, and our Title IIA, although it isn't a very large grant, is dedicated to professional development. And that funds our first day speakers sometimes, or it will fund some of our March 10th full day professional development. So those are the two federal grants, other than the special ed grants.
And isn't IDEA a federal?
IDEA is a
It's
federal
IDEA
grant as well.
So
IDEA
IDEA.
is a federal grant, but it's administered by the state.
It's administered
by the state.
Okay. But
Casper.
between the three, it's $475,000 in funding.
Right.
And funds roughly 10 headcount, so it matters.
It matters,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
I'm always very cautious at looking at Title I because the new census may change all of that, and all we need is to go down 1% point in our economically disadvantaged, and we lose approximately $40,000 to $50,000. That's the difference. We lose that category.
And when does that census take place?
I think we're in year 8 of our 10-year census at this point. I'd have to look, but I'm guessing.
So,
We are 2 years behind, so we are now working for this federal grant
yeah,
on FY16 for
Okay.
funding. So we're still, I think that is, it's every 10 years that the national census change, so I think we're in year 8.
so
Hoping
does the percent change year to year, or is that locked for that 10-year period? I guess
It's not locked.
Okay,
It depends on our population.
okay. I'm sorry, you said a 1% change in the economically disadvantaged could cause a 40,000?
Under
Okay.
5% economically disadvantaged
Yeah.
gives us a minimal funding.
Yeah,
Past 5%, and we are currently at 6.6.
okay.
Is that second tier, which it boosted us at that point 40,000. At which point you saw me doing a dance around the desk.
Okay.
That was about 3 years ago,
Yep. Okay,
and we've remained there since then.
okay. Thank you.
We may have to come back to you, should our budget, with the salary or any of those variables, to look at where do we prioritize. At this point, we have really brainstormed anything that we could possibly postpone, use, but at that point, we'll have to start looking at very serious things if we go over that line.
Centric savings are not that much, so.
No.
It's
I
like
mean,
every
it's
dollar
it's
helps.
$20,000, but we'll take
That
it.
can be quite major.
How much did you say?
I think if you add up the phone line budgets for all 4 buildings, it was like $23,000, so it's not gonna go to
And
zero.
the Centric's lines aren't all of that $23,000,
Yeah.
so.
So it's
Yeah.
somewhere
Ron Menard is working on getting some numbers now.
Okay.
I think our next step with the budget basically is what you see is having the principals explain their school budgets.
Just a couple of things I'd like to mention as long as we have the budget out.
Yep.
If you look at line 40, which is on page 2, and that's dealing with out-of-district tuition for SPED, and there's a large increase in SPED. And that is really a function, that bottom line number, where we go from $1.5 million to $1.8 million is really a function of the circuit breaker money that's being used.
Yep.
And I think as the
Yep.
committee knows, we collect
pulled
money
it
this
forward.
year for what we spent last year,
Yep.
and we use it next year. And this year, we're using some of the money that we were gonna get, that we got for this year's expense. What that means is, instead of having, we have $200,000 less next year. So if we had that $200,000, that would certainly smooth out that line item. If there's any good news in that, it's a balanced swing as we get through this year. We get through next year, you're gonna see that balance swing go the other way and
Yeah.
help out. Because
So-
instead of having $222,000, be back to $400,000, so it's gonna go back in the budget. That
So
will help.
currently so with this budget that we're looking at now, we're going back to the previous practice of having a full year in arrears. Because we haven't pulled forward any of the potential FY18.
That's the assumption at this point
Yep.
in time. That's the assumption at this point in time.
Right.
So that's really what is driving that SPED number, is the grants, that we get through circuit breaker.
But we did, I mean, it's not insignificant to note that we did have, we forecasted in 3% increases in tuition, and we still saw a $124,000 reduction in our out-of-district
Mhm.
tuition, and that's because we've had students either age out or graduate. So we have, and we knew that, and was part of the reason that we maybe felt less uncomfortable about pulling forward a portion of the FY17 to use in the 17. So those quote-unquote savings from having fewer out-of-district students in our population for FY18 has helped us. It's counteracted by the fact that that we're going back to having the full year in arrears.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
it's all gonna balance out in the end. But I do think it's important to note that we are going back to that full year in arrears, which was a protection that's common, I would say, John, for
It's a good
most
insurance
districts. It's a
policy.
good insurance policy, especially with the unknown at the federal level at this point.
Well, and I think when we look at FY17 actual, cause SPED is trending down, it's lower expended to budget currently than what the budget, the appropriation shows.
Mm-hmm.
So the increase for next year won't be as large.
Yeah, I think looking at the only reason I mentioned is when you look at this number, you shouldn't think that
Right.
SPED costs are out of control.
Right. No,
Yeah,
no,
I mean, the
no,
actual costs are, as you
Well,
suggest, going down.
Yeah.
As was expected. It's what we have for available funds.
Right.
It's the offsets
To
that
offset.
we chose
We should
deliberately
be-
to pull forward offsets to help us with last year. We are choosing deliberately not to pull forward again to put in
That is-
place that full protection for future years.
That's the assumption going forward.
Okay.
And I know we've talked about this budget before, so I guess the only other thing I would, so the only other,
John,
yeah,
bus leave, I just wanted to, on page, 4, under transportation regular ed services, John and I did meet with capital budget, Sam Wakeman and Brian Host along with Louise last week, and it was a good, productive conversation. We reviewed the maintenance logs, and they are supporting right now the $87,000 in proposed offset, so that, I mean, it still has to go to the full committee and we'll have those conversations at the end of this month, but, for now, the $87,000 in offset is a good number.
And the
Great.
formula has been set, so.
Yes.
That's,
Yeah, more-
that's the other, going forward.
We
much more
actually took the,
predictability.
yeah, and Sam, after that conversation, documented what was an ongoing conversation into a formal document, so we now have documented what the calculation behind the 16, 17, and the proposed 18 offset, so that we have that in memorial for future school committees and future capital budget committees, which is great.
That's great.
And then if you look very quickly at page 46, which shows revolving accounts and grant funds, the big negative number you see about halfway down the page is related to circuit breaker. And it's just the issue of year-over-year a change between what would be available in 18 as opposed to 17, which brings up the issue in terms of looking at the numbers on this page, on page 46. So as I put this page together, I had some choices. I could, for the 17 forecast, I could pick the reality we have now,
Yep.
or what the forecast was at the time you did this budget last year. I chose to use the forecast, because this is still in a preliminary stage, that you had last year. So when you do the comparison, certainly recognize that that's the number. It was the reality that we thought we were in at this time last year.
So that was the budget book number from last year.
Correct, for the 17 column.
Yeah. And as an example, Title I at the time we thought was $83,640, but we got the good news and the actual funds that we anticipate are $120,000.
Correct.
Which is why you justified it, the $120,000 for 18 presumably.
Yes,
Correct.
and the prediction for Title I has come out in January.
Yep.
And they expect level funding, so
So it looks like it's a good
So it
number.
looks like it'll be 120.
that's at this point.
That's the expectation, but that's as of today.
Good.
Before they had morning coffee, that's where they are.
And the circuit breaker number, John, the 227, is that based on Charlie Baker's?
So that's based upon what we will have to apply to the 18 budget, which is what we received what we're receiving this year, less than $200,000.
That we used for
That we used.
special education.
That we're
Yeah.
using this year.
Okay.
So what we get next year, what we get in 18 when they finally pass the budget,
Mm-hmm.
is the number you will see in the 19 year.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I kind of struggled with that myself.
Yeah.
I think at some point, we should just have a footnote
Sure.
around what whenever we know between the governor and the soon-to-be state budget, what the FY 18 circuit breaker is, cause I understand why you did this comparison here,
Yeah.
because it is what we're utilizing in the 18 budget, but in terms of what we're gonna have for 19, it's based on FY 18's.
That's, and that's to come up with a real good number, isn't really, I don't think it's gonna happen until you get to about May.
Yeah.
Because we have to do two things. One, we have to know what our claim's gonna be.
True.
So
Okay.
we've gotta do the claiming part, what did we actually expend? And then we've gotta know what the reimbursement rate's gonna be. And so that is, circuit breaker's sort of usually been one of the last items that actually gets finalized. The House and the Senate often go back and forth over that number. So
Okay.
I don't think we'll have the 18 number, which goes in your 19 budget, until we get to about really May, maybe June. But we can certainly get a better number than with certainly can make a guess, just,
So maybe what we do instead, just so that people aren't wondering why circuit breaker
why
dropped
is the
from
big
four.
change, sure.
I think maybe we should just footnote
Yep.
or star that there's, next to the 227, that
Mhm.
$200,000 of it is being spent in fiscal 17, so that people know that the true comparison is 449 to 447. We just chose to spend
Right.
$200,000 of it in fiscal 17 and left ourselves
Mhm.
$227,000. So I think if we just footnote that $200,000 was spent in FY 17.
Sure.
Cause we're not, I guess, we're not facing at this point a concern that we're gonna see a drop in our funding level for FY 18, which will apply in 19. It's gonna be $400,000 and change. I don't want people thinking that the run rate's going down. The run rate, as far as we know, is staying in that $450,000 range.
Yeah, depending on how much we actually spend.
Yes, I mean, it
It's
will,
not gonna, it's not that, we're not losing, it's not a grant program that's been cut in half,
no,
and that's not what we want people to know that.
okay. Before I forget, 'cause I am looking for any potential offsets that could help us in this next round, can we make sure to recalculate the pre-K offset?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's gonna benefit us. Do we know how many pre-K students Mary is anticipating?
It's capped. It has a waiting list of 3, I believe. Has a slight waiting list at this point.
So last year, we had assumed that there were gonna be 16 students who were peers that were paying, so that's,
I wanna say they're 15. I would have to ask
Okay.
her. All I know is there is a waiting list of a few students.
okay,
Maybe anywhere from 1 to 3.
okay. On the peer side, okay,
Correct.
alright.
Those
It's gonna help us,
letters are
a little
going
bit. It's not gonna
Those are
help us.
going out in shifts, so they should be going out within the next week.
Okay. I guess the only other kind of macro question that I had was about utilities.
Mm-hmm.
Just methodology wise, how did you approach the two biggies, which are heat and electricity?
So I'm making the assumption that the methodology you used last year is a good one.
Okay.
Doesn't seem too far off, although right now it feels a little like in some cases we've underestimated the cost of heating but overestimated the cost of electricity. And it seems to be the way it's working. If it's a normal year and as we get past March bills start to look a lot like October, November bills, it ought to work out. And I've assumed that we're gonna see an overall increase of 3%.
Yep.
Now, I recognize that we've capped the cost of supply. We know what that's gonna be, we're in a 3-year contract, but it's the transmission distribution cost, it's between 45 and 65% of the bill that is uncapped. That's a regulated monopoly, that's the part that DPU puts in. And what that's gonna be, gosh, I don't know. So it does not seem like an unrealistic number, because it really says overall, you're looking at an increase, it's gonna run somewhere around 4 to 6% round numbers in the cost of distribution, which seems to be about what we've seen these last few years.
The thing that I struggle with the utilities, and, I mean, the 3%.
And having said all of that, if it turns out to be a year like 2 years ago, where it is just cold and snows all the time, doesn't matter when we,
Yeah.
whatever a plan was, it's all out the window.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the 3% increase on heat and electricity seems to be a reasonable assumption. Telephone, we kept flat, knowing that there are some modest savings because of the changeover. And then on the water, if you back out the trash, it looked like it was close to like a 2.5–3% increase on water also. Okay. The water one, honestly, that line in some of the buildings really confuses me.
You should look at the
Yeah.
bills.
Confuses me too.
Okay. Cause you look at the expended and history, it doesn't necessarily tie to the expended, so
There is no logic.
but in terms of the side, I mean, just for, the water bill is, out of our total district, we've got, I think close to $900,000 in utility expenses, and our water bill is $100,000 of it. Our biggest ones are electricity, which is $480,000, and our heat, which is $300,000 and change. So it, even though we may be off, it's not gonna hurt us like utilities, like the
Right.
heat and electricity will. The savings from all the green initiatives that have happened, is that, are we not seeing that because we're still paying for those savings in our rates? I guess I'm struggling to see why our usage numbers aren't coming down in terms of electricity in particular, given all the change outs that have happened.
Well, I think you see some, my recollection is we actually see some of that savings here at the high school, in terms of electricity usage. I'm hoping, but we'll see, I'm hoping that the changes they've made to the building management system, the HVAC system at Deer Hill and Osgood is gonna help us next year, and get control of those heating costs, and cooling costs in the case of Osgood. Here at the high school, you knew what this room has been like. It's been a little cold sometimes, and you know, I had an office that I came in the morning and it was 86 degrees every morning.
We know, we spent a lot of time in meetings
That's right,
on
you
that
spend a lot of time, you know better than I do.
Call that the sweat box.
Yeah.
We did.
So, and I know Mark Kelly is working to try to get this heating system under control, so hopefully that's gonna help.
Here's a silly comment, is there any impact that all of the devices being plugged in and the carts, charging stations, is that gonna have on electricity?
It's certainly gonna make a difference. You know, we're plugging more things in and using more power. You know, the history has been, in schools, every time somebody builds a new school, two things happen. One is it costs less to heat the new school than the old school. The second is you spend more on electricity in the new school than the old school because there's so many more things that run by computer. Now, the good news is that, I expect that we're gonna see an awful lot of people who bring their devices in, are gonna charge them at home at night before they come to school.
Right.
And frankly, the other part of it is that, the little power converters that somebody uses to recharge their Chromebook, use a lot less power than that desktop computer we used to give them, or the
Good point.
CRT that they used to have.
Right.
Now, I don't know how many CRTs we have to swap out to make up for a power converter for a Chromebook or whatever somebody's using, or tablet.
At one point, we had swapped out the big bulky ones though, for more cost-effective monitors.
Yeah, I don't think we have any more CRTs around. I know
No,
that
we
this
shouldn't.
summer you declared surplus.
yeah, we
and
had to
got
get rid
a
of
bunch
In
them.
the graveyard.
Yeah, they were a fire hazard.
Crazy.
The fire department didn't like seeing them piled up like that, so.
Yeah, I don't think anybody realized how many had gotten piled up.
Yeah.
There were quite a few, but those are gone.
It's all good.
So the budget is, as the superintendent suggested, there's not much in there that is that is excess. I mean, the budget was put together
Right.
with responsibly, but certainly we're guessing what things will cost 18 months from now.
Yeah.
I hope we're right. And without a lot of, I don't wanna I'm not sure how I wanna put it, but certainly without a lot of margin in it.
Right.
So, I think next year we're gonna have to be somewhat more cautious about what we spend and when we spend it.
Well, I think that this is a great piece of work. I'm very appreciative of having the employees listed at each level, so we know where those people are. I think it's great that we've held the line and we won't be hiring anyone, with the exception of the one person who is needed for technology.
And frankly, you could not hire very many teachers for what we're gonna pay this person, so understanding it's not an expense
Yeah.
for an employee.
I don't think we could hire any teachers. So I think that all of that together makes it a great document. And hopefully,
And we'll go back and change it because we have some,
hopefully midnight will come and go and there won't be any more emails.
Cause I don't hear your phone stinging.
You make sure that at 12:01 you say no.
No, I think they're a timeline.
So on, I don't know what page, it's maybe the 1, 2, 3, the fourth page in, the school committee budget priorities. Do we have an opportunity maybe to go over those as a committee and, I don't, because we had a lot of them and I think it should coincide with how we're gonna make our budget presentation. You know, they should mirror each other.
I think that's a good idea. This was pretty much mirrored what we had last year.
And a lot of our bullet points in our budget message mirrored last year, but we do have some other ones, so.
How would you like to do that?
Do you wanna read them?
Do I wanna read them out loud?
Do we wanna read them out loud or do you?
Oh, no, I think that, as Katie has requested budget subcommittee meetings, so I think as we have
Discuss them
those, we
then.
discuss them then.
Oh, okay,
Of how we
great.
wanna articulate them.
Sure.
That's a good idea.
Cause I think it's one thing to have the dollars and cents tie at this point in the budget cycle, and I have to say that I've only watched this for 3 years previous, but this is the first year where we're sitting in February and we're at the town manager's number.
Right.
Not to say that we're not gonna shift a little bit out of whack when the column changes finish coming through. It's a great place to be sitting, but I do think the messaging, and perhaps some of this will come out when the building principals present next week, but talking about what services they're able to deliver in terms of the student academic piece of it, both in terms of literacy and some of the changes being made there, in terms of social emotional, in terms of the special education. I think that's the piece that, when it comes to the messaging of this, the dollars and cents, I'm glad they tie, but it's really what are we delivering for these dollars and cents. And my overall read on this is that we're actually delivering on the vast majority of student achievement priorities we set in the budget message, which coincided with our strategic plan. We have been creative in terms of reconfiguring staffing in order to achieve that. We've also benefited from the fact that our enrollment is now under 1,600 and it's staying flat for all intents and purposes year over year from what we can see. That helps. We're not facing the enrollment pressure. So it's that messaging piece around the dollars and cents that I think that it'll be good to hear from the building principals, and that's what we're gonna work towards in terms of the public hearing on the 15th, is putting together that package, which really messages, what are you getting for your money, besides.
I think what
How-
you're
how
going to
did you get
hear is that the priorities are very clear: service over material. And a set of textbooks can be $40,000. So when looking at needing 3 or 4 full sets of textbooks, the discussion is, what does that do for the service that we give the children as opposed to stuff? And as important as those textbooks are, can we phase them in? So those are the kinds of discussions that we had, where the priorities were very clear.
Right.
What are we delivering for the best education for our children and the services that we need, based on our strategic plan, our technology plan, and our vision? But that's by no means
Without trade-offs.
saying we have everything in here. We've just made choices that were very clear to our mission. So I think that's what you'll hear from the principals, and they chose wisely. And some of the things where, for example, the literacy coming to the grade 2 to transition into grade 3, rather than buy the entire text, has been a filtering in pilot, where the teachers are being more creative and implementing the skills and strategies as opposed to buying the program. So those kinds of discussions, and I can't say enough how many of those very meaningful discussions that were done collaboratively. So it's been a very meaningful discussion and a very meaningful process, but by no means easy. So.
And I think the other piece of collaboration that's worth mentioning is the collaboration with the town and the long-range planning group, because there was quite a bit of work leading up to setting of that 5-year forecast and a target number for both the town budgets and the school budgets, and where we landed in terms of that 5-year forecast number in middle of December gave us the ability to build a budget, not without reconfiguring to meet the needs of the service needs, but it really, I think for the first time, it was a number that we knew from the start that we could actually wrap our hands around and work with.
Right.
And I know this committee knows it, but I think it's worth stating for the public that following on those December meetings in January, we did get some bad news as a town about one of our pension obligations for FY18, which has increased the expense by an unanticipated $200,000. So there's not more money coming out of the 5-year fiscal forecast at this point. We're trying to plug holes as a town to meet the Norfolk County pension. So I feel, you said you're right, it's not over until we vote it at May 1st, but right now the number that we have in terms of the year-over-year increase of $575,000 is holding, and that's after the town has faced a significant unanticipated increase in pension. So I think there's a lot of people that are working together on this one.
I think it's a good town and school relationship at this point. I agree.
Okay.
Louise, I think you've articulated tonight and in previous meetings the creativity, and like tonight you talked about, last year we had staff requests for 1.0 ESP and 1.0 SPED social studies, and you've managed to fill that creatively, looking at existing staff, and I think those are the biggest hits to a budget when you have to add staff, and talked about the reorganization of the specialists at Deer Hill so that you have them, because we had a shortfall in gym. I think those are interesting talking points about how we fulfill the student services with staff, because that's the biggest part of the budget as well.
Actually, the outcome has been positive, which is the other point, you know, and we
Right.
looked at reconfiguring how children at the elementary school were having physical education. We actually then allowed students or accommodated students to have the other interests, art and those other technology and so on. So it turned into the good thing.
Yeah.
So it was great, yeah.
That's great.
Any more comments or discussion? No?
For another time. What you have is also the work of collaboration among the leadership, and again, very meaningful discussions. I would say they're a great team, but I have to say we're a great team. And this is an outcome of that. It's the Cohasset Public Schools Employee Handbook. And we did not have one. We do now, and it is on the website for all of the schools in the district. And there are some highlights, rather than go through the whole book, that are some interesting points. they're going savvy. It is on the website. There will be continuous changes to them. There are some benefits to this that actually benefit all of us. The executive summaries of the strategic plan and tech plan are in here as well. There's also an important disclaimer for employees to understand that student rights to holidays, and that we need to be very cognizant that the holidays that some of us have learned to expect and sometimes mislabel do not fit all, and that children do not need or should not be penalized. So those kinds of messages are very clear. There is also a very good articulation of what's expected of staff and what our culture. And if you read through it, it makes it very clear what we expect as our school culture and as our community culture, that we expect certain professional judgment and independence in judgment and conduct. And as much as I really dislike the word insubordination, what the chain of command is, that we don't jump through hoops and directly go either to the superintendent or to the community at large, with that there are certain kind and logical sequences for voicing our displeasure or our pleasure or whatever, so that their conduct is very clear. There are also, if you look at it, a large number of policies that have been renewed and done and so on and updated, a large number that have to do with staff, and another large number that have to do with student expectations. And if you look at them online, they are direct links.
I love
That was I was gonna ask that question.
So it is, any updated policy directly goes to that, so there's no need to update it in hard copy and then go back and
That's
make sure that
terrific.
it's posted. So it will automatically post itself. And it's very clear that employees have very specific policies, and there are a number of them. And I think looking at them, just by looking at the number of policies, brings to mind that there are certain expectations of all staff and all administrators that they need to look at. They need to know what is expected and what is expected of students. There are also very specific definitions that I'm particularly pleased about, and one of the pieces are the benefits that employees are not allowed but have privilege to as town employees and as school employees. Also, the explanation of what Medco, recently we had the discussion that Medco is not a private school. It isn't a club. It is a private school that travels from Boston to our school, and they are Cohasset students. So that to me was a good piece to really have articulated. Also our PBIS initiatives. And what is a 504 and who's responsible for them was very important to me. And what is Title I? How do we get it? What is it? And that it's very important that it is directly related to literacy. Also there, and I think that many staff are not cognizant that we have a curriculum accommodation plan. And our curriculum accommodation plan was a result of arduous work that simply sends the message that we deal with all children individually and we meet the needs of every child. That there are 3 tiers based on the MTSS system with the state, that for one, all children have tier 1, and for those who do not access the curriculum or skill work, there is tier 2. And for those who are still struggling, there is tier 3, and what they are. And that they're very clear, and we've adopted them. So it's very clear what we talk about. Also what student services are, what the restraint policy is, what does a student service director encompass? So I really particularly like the work that was done there. And I have to give real credit to both Carol and Connolly, who really put all our materials together, and with Mary, who worked with her for this very difficult piece. But also Mary spearheaded a committee that is just culminating at this point for the allergy protocol.
Yeah.
We did not have one, and we obviously need the policy to go with it very soon. But it is online, and part of this, that will be updated in its final stage, and that too will be a link. But it is listed there so parents are very clear, and so teachers understand as well as all employees that we have a no food policy, that those Valentines shouldn't have candies in. So those kinds of things.
Oopsie.
Yeah, there were oopsies.
Uh-oh.
But
and verify that all of them were peanut free.
La, la, la. I don't hear it. But those, inadvertently we do those, it's part of our culture, but that it's very clear that some of our children cannot be exposed to that kind of thing. So it's there. There's also the emergency management crisis intervention. So it's very clear what ALICE is, what our initiative is, what our safety is, and all of that can be updated, but it is the first, and we now have a clear Cohasset Public Schools employee handbook. And I have shared much of this material with the towns, so that hopefully it is, I've sent it to Lisa, so that when the town either revises or puts its handbook together, there will be replication.
That's
be
great.
all of them. I don't want this to be too encompassing, I want it to really be the focus of who and what we are as a culture. There is also one that is in its final stages as a handbook, and that is the student parent handbook that hopefully we will have. Jennifer has to work through many of the templates that go through. It's pretty large, but that will be the handbook for parents for all students pre-K-12. And the individual schools will also be included in that. So if a student has, if a parent has a student in kindergarten, grade 2, grade 5, and high school, it is the same handbook.
That's
Huge.
awesome.
And
Right.
everything in
That's
the
huge.
front. Well, the other policy is that,
We get to review one instead of three.
Yes, but-
We've been asking for that for 3 years.
but rules are
so
rules.
thank you.
And rules that apply to a kindergarten also apply to a 12th
Right.
grader.
Great.
They're who and what we are and what we expect. So that large tome that we're working through will be the major piece, and then hopefully we either color code or delineate the various schools, and that's going to be very thin. That's very specific.
Right.
Middle high school obviously has very different, MIA rules
Right.
and suspensions and so on.
Right.
And we certainly don't wanna go into substance abuse with a kindergartner, so. So everything that, and we're still filtering through that. So both documents are organic at this point, we're still working through, but they have been major feats, and we've worked at it, our leadership team in these days, so this is the first.
Question. When the conversation about this came up, I think it was the end of last year at some point, there's also talk about employee forms, that there was a vast library of different forms for different reasons on different colored pieces of paper.
They no longer exist.
Okay, so the employees have a source to go to for a vacation form or a
Correct.
personal day, whatever forms that they need.
Right, what we did
Okay.
with that, Jennifer's still reworking some of them. We found some of the forms were not clear enough.
Okay.
So when we find them, we revamp them, but they're all online. We've pulled them all out of the office, all out of teachers' rooms, and everything else. There is no pink, there is no blue.
Excellent.
There is no strange language existing. We've redone all of them. They are all online
Okay.
under employee forms and documents, and
Okay.
they're all in the first column. The other thing that the staff is working its second session, our last session, was to look at the first column in every website where it says about the school or about
Yeah.
the district, and it is exact. If you look at each of them right now, they are all identical. So, and in the same order.
Mhm.
And some may have an added one, but we're looking at each one to know that if it's about the school, it looks identical. It's not a welcome to our school as opposed to a profile. So, great deal of work is being done.
Oh, yeah.
That's great.
So the employees can fill out a form online and then
Yes.
get it approved online electronically? No.
Because it has to be submitted for signature from the
Okay.
school, then it comes here. So
Okay.
it really has to be in hard copy, and we file it in their personnel folder,
Okay.
so.
Okay.
Just two quick things. Clarifying on the allergy protocol, is this a draft of what you expect to be finalized?
It's pretty close to final
Okay.
form.
So what we're looking
But
at
it
here.
has not been finalized. They have one more meeting
Okay.
according to.
Tomorrow.
It's tomorrow.
Okay.
But what we really wanted included as much information as we
Yeah.
could, so we can always revamp.
Right.
It's
Gotcha.
online, so
It's easy, okay.
it's easy switching with those.
All right, and then I have to compliment whoever did the write-up around the tiered support, 1, 2, 3. This,
Yeah.
to me, was the best
Huge.
explanation I've seen yet
Thank you very much.
in layman's terms as to what it means. Honestly, when I read it, this came up at CPAC meeting around IEP 101 as to what can you expect in terms of an IEP, but what should you be able to expect in a gen ed setting, and trying to explain tier 1, 2, or 3. There wasn't any document that we could point to for those parents who are trying to understand, am I really looking at, do I want to be asking for a tier 2 support for my child, or should I be going the direction of an IEP? I thought that this write-up would be a great document to have both discussed at CPAC, available to CPAC, but also just generally to parents, because honestly, this was the first time where I read it and I was like, okay, now I understand kind of what I should be talking to the district about in terms of my student. Because I think in the vacuum of not having this, people automatically think, well, I need to go for the IEP because they don't have any language or another tool to talk to the district about.
Right, it's going from 0 to 100.
Right.
Because there is no knowledge in between.
Right.
Or any articulation of but what the tiered support is that every student has a tier 1. We check in for understanding, we make sure they understand.
Right.
But in a general education, at any point in time, any student could be in a tier 2.
Right.
And we go in and out. When we get to a tier 3, we've really worked really hard. And
Yeah.
now we have to have the hard conversations. Is it something that is temporary, or is it something that's long range, and
Right.
those kinds of things. So that does articulate it, and it's very clear that that is part of good education.
I personally would, once we get through budget season and we get back to the good conversations around academic progress, I would love to have this tiered support structure presented to the school committee formally, because I would love to hear the conversation. I also think it's an important one to get out in the community. So I'd put that on Jean and your radar screens to figure out, but I have to give compliments here.
Did you ask, and you may have asked this already, I was gonna ask, is that information gonna go in the parent-student handbook?
No, this is an employee handbook. The tiered
The
support.
tier information,
Yes,
tiered
that is
support
included.
information. Yeah, that was my
I
question.
believe it's included in the student parent handbook. I
Right.
have to look again.
Okay. 'Cause I was
It's
just
in
gonna
many
say it'd be
places
great to
on the
have it.
website too. I'd have to look again.
I feel like every time I've seen it, it's that one page.
Difficult triangle.
Well, it's the
triangle.
chart, and it's that triangle, as nice as it is graphically, and it's one page, it doesn't
Doesn't explain.
and this explains to me kind of what is behind each of those slices of the triangle, so.
And I will gladly explain that to you. I usually explain it to teachers as a triangle is a 70-20-10.
Yeah.
And whenever any assessment is put together, 70% should be what all students can answer. 20% should be what some students can answer, and the 10% should be those who really need to reach. So every assessment should be based on that, and that's what the tiered support is. And all students get that 70%, and that tier 2 has to be that 20%, where you don't have to go back and reteach it and make many of them catch it. And then am I challenging the others who have already accomplished all of that? And that's good education. It's just universal design for learning. So.
I just had one comment about the handbook. It's great to see it. The one thing I didn't see in it was and it was referenced a couple of times in the allergy protocol, is just the medical emergency response plan in addition to the crisis plan.
That was not finalized at the time that went to print, I believe.
Okay.
So that was still in progress.
Okay.
And this has been, I think this was put together almost a month ago.
Okay.
So that's why it needs to be,
Okay. Because I know the goal at some point is to merge the crisis plan
Correct.
and the medical emergency response
Right.
plan. So I just didn't know if we should include
No,
the medical response as well.
when the entire medical emergency or the allergy protocol is finished,
Yep.
I see it as a separate document also.
Okay.
So it would appear twice.
It would
This
be
is
in
an
there.
employee handbook.
Right.
The other should be available to all parents.
Okay.
So I see it as posted as a separate document. But that too has been quite an accomplishment.
And there's gonna be policy changes as a result of that
There
protocol.
needs to be a policy for the allergy, I
Okay.
believe, so that was in the discussion with the committee, I believe, so
Yep.
that's something you could probably speak to.
Yeah, once, the protocol, there was a lot of discussion about what's a policy versus a protocol. The protocol is really, here's the rules and
Yep.
here is how we're gonna approach, allergies. The policy that we need to look at is basically going to say, and we have to go through our policy binder and pull the ones that reference food allergies and just make sure that terminology matches what we've put in the protocol.
Yeah.
But the policies also need to say that you need to follow the protocol. The policy is more of an umbrella.
Yep.
And so once the protocol is fully put together, the plan is to meet as a subcommittee and with Mary and figure out what we need to do with the existing policies and make sure that ours are updated to MASC with new language in regard to food allergies.
Okay.
So that's ongoing.
It's to marry the two.
Yes, yep.
Spring project.
Spring, yeah. Sort of like the technology, there's
Yeah.
the technology policies, which are pretty broad, and then
Right.
there's the actual user
Right.
rules and
Yeah.
protocols, same idea.
I had one minor question on page 43. And it had, I found it curious that one of the, under Joseph Osgood School, that it, part of our team is a custodian, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
But not in the other two buildings.
I think the buildings set up their own teams.
Okay.
It just happened that this, for them, worked.
Okay.
It could be
Okay.
proximity in the building, I'd have to ask. I think
You
it's
don't
set
have
up
to,
as to
that's-
who's trained, where you are, what you
Okay.
do, those kind of responsibilities.
I think at Osgood
Who
too,
volunteers.
versus, if there was an emergency,
Oh,
who
another-
emails would be
okay.
available to respond.
That could probably it.
Okay.
So it's,
You don't have to ask me these, that's fine.
It changes. Also, the other piece that you have is the enrollment update. We've had a couple of changes. It might be a chuckle. Our half-day kindergarten has had a preschool has had a move-in.
Yep.
So we've increased by one, and we've had someone move out in full-day kindergarten. Other than that, the only other changes are in grade 10. We have our lovely student who is living with a family in the community who has come here from Germany. He's delightful, and has adjusted well, from what I understand, and is enjoying his classes. And the poor child came into first day of reading Shakespeare. And Othello at that, so
Difficult for English
Right.
language speakers to.
both feet right off the diving board. Grade 11 was interesting. We had a one-day enrollee and a second day unenrolled, twins. So, although it says 99, they were back to 97
Okay.
as of this day,
Okay.
so.
So that +2 will disappear
It
next.
was a +2, -2 in 24 hours.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Well, at least they figured.
So, I'm not sure what the story is there. That's what that was. Other than that, that is very current. I think I mentioned before that monthly reports from the principals state explicitly who the students are and what grade. So we keep track of enrollment spending.
Which certainly makes sense.
I have a question or comment.
Yes.
Louise, you just love me for this. My comments on this one. So,
I probably do not have the answer.
no, it's just another heading thing. I'm just wondering, when it says number of sections and classes, I'm wondering if it should say 2016-2017 school
Well,
year?
you did mention that the last time and we didn't change it.
Okay. Just 'cause second grade last year did have 7
Yep.
sections and.
It should be FY 17.
Yep, 16-17, yep. Yeah.
Does it,
It
does
does.
the spreadsheet, if you just move that column in between June of 16 and September of 16?
Yeah, you can do that.
It does mess it up, okay.
Either way.
It does for
We just
Jennifer,
title it.
it really
Just so you
confuses
can track it
people,
back,
so-
'cause
Okay.
otherwise.
We did talk about that.
The
looks
heading
like
on the
each
page
class.
doesn't cover that?
No, I think if we change the heading, we'll be fine.
Just change the heading to
Yep.
FY 17 number of
Yep.
sections per class.
Cause if you look at second grade and see 6 sections and you see 138 students in February of 16, you assume that the class sizes were
Huge.
much larger than what they
Right.
actually were. You like, I'm just going back from a historical, to be historically accurate.
We could put in the column current number of sections and classes, that would leave the template year for year.
I personally just call it FY 17 and
Yeah.
we'll update it next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Will
Not this school
do.
year.
Okay.
Okay.
In kindergarten, no change actually, we have 80 full-day kindergarten cherubs coming in for next year. And we have I reviewed several of the Medco applications. I had a question on 2 of them, so that 2 are definitive. 2, we need a little bit of research on specifics, not academic necessarily, just stuff. So we're still working at that with Elisa, and since we've had time, those days out, it's been difficult to reconnect.
So are the
that-
80 registered or is that?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a comment on that. Can we maybe put another little blurb in the newspaper, like at the first of each month? A reminder,
To
because that number is so low,
Historically low, I
it
was
makes
just gonna
me
say it worries me.
uncomfortable.
Made me a little nervous.
Based on last year, it's making me uncomfortable because the number's so low.
Cause we haven't had under 90 in like 10
Yeah.
years, right?
Yeah.
I
Or
can't
two
even
last call.
remember.
Yeah, I mean, it could be titled, Last Call for Kindergarten Registration.
I think last
That's
call-
already been done since we had a
Oh.
lottery, so
Oh.
the
I
registration's
still
already
think,
taken
what, this is
place.
Cohasset, we're doing a couple last calls.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering how the 80 would match up with the preschool enrollments.
1999
she's
was
gone
the
to
last time
preschools.
we
Yeah,
had
she's
under
talked to all of
100.
them. I think what we can do in Mariner is just basically say if your child is to register for kindergarten, you're late.
Yes.
Please
Yeah.
do so.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
full day or anything else,
Right.
but
That's actually even a better
Kindergarten
message.
registration.
Yeah, that is a better message.
As we're trying to get both our staff and our community to actually respect deadlines, we should let them know that, yeah. Well, I mean, 1999 was the last time we had a class, it was 95, that is our
Yeah.
lowest class in the last 20 years.
20 years, that's,
So we've got a small, so
We
it's-
have had graduating classes that are smaller, but we all know
Sure.
that that's
No.
different.
that's different.
Several years ago, we had a graduating class of 88, so,
we still have 12 spots open
Yeah.
mhm.
for full day, but we only have 6 half days, so we
Right.
definitely have room there for another 14.
Right.
So that appeases me a little bit,
Yeah.
nervousness, but the number does seem quite large.
So we-
And
we've got
actually, I
80.
said to Judy today, I think you have it wrong, and she said, no, there are the names. So,
So 80 registered and we have 4 that we think are gonna be Metco,
correct.
okay?
And 4 are reserved for mandated special education
Okay, so it's
IEPs.
12.
So we've got the 80 who are registered Cohasset residents, plus 4 for Metco that we know will fill. We've got 4 held for IEPs that we don't know whether they're going to fill or not, so we're at 88
Correct.
there, okay?
What do we have in half day again? Did you say?
9.
6.
Six?
Okay, gotcha, so you have a lot of room.
Something
in half day.
happened. I thought I had 9 initially, we now have 6.
So we have 26 open, like spots we can
Correct.
fill, okay. And what that would bring us to, a more.
I just don't want any big
Historical
surprises on
number.
August 15th, please.
But we
Maybe
can
half
handle
day.
this, okay.
Yeah,
And 14 could be a big surprise.
yeah,
So I think we're okay.
all right.
It's weird. On the, just flipping back to the budget book, we've got slightly bigger numbers in the budget book, so I would just update the, half-day kindergarten number to 6, not 9, and then, maybe we put, I don't know what we wanna put for kindergarten.
I really would not want to change those numbers because there are parents who are still vacillating on is my child ready? And they have come in and asked those kinds of questions. And those would be in a half day.
Okay. I again, it's not gonna materially,
It's still the same number of sections. Because if we reduce the number of sections, we go over the 20. So it's still the same,
yeah,
it
Yeah.
remains
we
the
can't
same.
take the 88 and divide it by 4, cause you get to 22, Okay.
All right.
I
So
agree with
it's-
Jean that the "you are late" message, in the Mariner one last time is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
At the marquee at the transfer station.
There you go.
Yeah.
Blackboard Connect. we
Yeah,
go back
Lisa
to
didn't
that.
believe that would work, did she?
The transfer station is,
Oh, yeah.
it's a flashing billboard.
And I have to say, she was very excited about the 16 people who came in the evening to register. I'm very excited that that was an option. I think that we really need to do things like that for working parents. Or for parents who have lots of kids at home and nobody to watch them. So I think that that was a great thing to do, and I hope that that continues year after year. That's my little blurb on that.
We also don't know about summer move-ins too. I mean,
Right.
some years we've
We've
had a
had
big
3
move.
calls,
Yeah.
saying, you know, we're finishing our home, I have an address, do I register now? And Judy's a great gatekeeper, so it could be that they've not yet registered.
Okay. All right, so we're ready to move on to the school committee comments and communication. Can we just back up to the budget discussion that we've had this evening? In the past, once we've discussed the budget in public, we've published it on the website. So if we could mark this draft on the front page and publicize it on the school committee section so that it says draft of FY18 budget, so that anybody who wasn't able to come here, it's hard to follow along on facts and figures.
Absolutely.
So if we could do that. Okay, and the first item on our agenda is the superintendent's contract. And the school committee is very pleased to announce that we have reached a final agreement on a contract with Superintendent Demas, and we are ready to take a vote. So I would call for a motion to approve the superintendent's contract for the period from January 1st, 2017 through June 30th, 2019. And could I have a motion?
So moved.
And do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, roll call, please.
I, Barbara Steffen.
Hi, Katie Dugan.
I, Gina Stino.
Hi, Ellen Mar.
I, Amanda Zani.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Now we can change this, right?
That's right. I looked at that tonight and I thought, well, we don't wanna jinx it, I guess, but make sure that we get that fixed tomorrow.
I want a wooden one.
Then we'd all need wooden ones,
Right,
Louise.
that's right.
That could be the budget tipping point.
Yeah.
I'd say gold plated, that's good.
That's funny. Okay, and then the next item on the agenda is the discussion of our Cohasset Public Schools glossary. And thank you so much for putting this together. School committee terms and terminology is very confusing for a lot of people. So it's very helpful to have this, and it will be posted on the website, possibly added to some of our documents that as we go along. But it's just an alphabetical listing of terms that are utilized in the schools, in the town, such as AAA bond rating with an explanation. Chapter 70 school funds, and it explains how that works. Does it actually, I didn't read this, but does it actually have the formula in there?
No,
Okay.
I did this one last year and I sought that middle ground and
Yeah,
didn't crush the soul.
the formula for the figuring those funds, they have a whole workshop at the MASC conference some years discussing that. So what cherry sheets are, what a circuit breaker is, and I'm just touching on some of the items. DESE is an acronym for the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. FAPE, Free and Appropriate Public Education. Talks about aid to schools, what an IEP is, and we've spoken this evening about further delineating the terminology involved in establishing, who's at what level basically in various points in their school careers, and how we address their needs. Level service budget, so a lot of it is budget related. Some of it is school related, some of it is town related, and for example, there's information on the Municipal Modernization Act, Massachusetts Tiered System of Support, METCO, Long Range Planning Group, lists all of the acronyms for PBIS and UDL and what those things mean. So it's just helpful for people on the outside looking in who wanna understand more about what goes on in the district, some of the issues that we discuss at our meetings, and what some of this terminology means. So this is a very useful document, and thank you so much.
Just add one.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Not to be flying appointment. Can you put ESSA, ESSA, which is the new No Child Left Behind replacement?
Yeah.
Every child succeeds at.
There was a couple, that I saw in the handbook that weren't in here, so I was thinking if this is accepted, we could put it up, and then I can send you a new draft when I get back from break that has, I'll cross-reference your handbook and then make sure all the terms that are in the back of this are here. I may do it when I get back.
You want, I think another ad could be MIAA. That's right on, just a little.
MIA.
Yeah, Massachusetts
Massachusetts
Interscholastic
Scholastic
Athletic
Oh, okay,
Association.
yep.
Nicely done. This is great.
As I said, this is great and very much appreciated, thank you so much.
I'd just say, I thought chapter 70 was a code word for superintendent's appointment. Code, I'm just speaking in code.
That's funny. So do we want to approve this pending changes, or do we want to just wait until the next meeting? We can do that.
Well, I don't know if it could get posted as it is.
I would post it
Yeah,
as
we
it.
can post it as it is.
And then
It's
I
not a
will
problem.
add,
Yeah.
as soon as I get back, the
Okay.
week after next, I
All
can
right.
add the additional terms.
There's an iteration of this posted, right?
There is, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
do we have to
This
re-vote
is,
it since it's
this is an
already?
expansion.
And we didn't
Not
vote this last year, we
substantially
just,
different.
We just added it.
we just added it.
Yeah.
Right.
It was like the FAQ, we agreed
Right.
that we reviewed the content, we were
Yeah.
all in agreement, and we posted it, so.
Okay.
I think that, again, this is a living document, and so we may discover 6 months from now, something new comes up.
Something new
to
comes
where-
up or something goes away.
Yeah,
You never know.
exactly. No, I think it's
Okay.
great, it's just timely to get up a revised version, given that it's budget season.
Right. An educated, was it that they said, an educated consumer is the best
Our best
customer?
customer size sales. I grew up in the tri-state area.
Okay, so if we could post this on the website too, that would be great. Thank
And I'll
you.
give you an updated one as it is.
They'll both appear under,
So next is the update on sped stabilization warrant article.
Yes.
And we handed out some information.
Yeah, and
this evening.
what circulated around in hard copy was, what I got from Senator O'Connor's office, which was, on the left-hand column, it's the old, chapter 45B section language that we, based our current sped stabilization fund under. I think I mentioned last time that after I met him, I didn't realize that there were actually being modifications being made to section 5B. They don't change any of the language that drives our sped stabilization, but they and I bolded on the back what really were the material changes. In some cases, they kind of genericized it, because what happened under MMA is that they made section 5B a bit more generic, and then in the new section 13E, which is specifically addressing sped stabilization funds, I call that out. There's another section under MMA that I believe addresses OPEB and OPEB stabilization funds. So they've kind of genericize the broader 5B language, and then where there's been particular needs related to special education or OPEB, they've created new language or new sections. The section 13E is really the language that, it's exactly the language that we've seen before, but this was just clarifying that there were some changes being made to the existing 5B. I circulated via email, and I didn't think to bring copies tonight of the actual article language that Paul Durensis is proposing. Did that?
Am I here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, you saw that, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't bring copies, so I didn't know who had seen it and who hadn't. So, following on our conversations earlier, I had contacted town council through Chris Senior's office to have him draft up language. He has drafted up a proposed warrant article to amend and reallocate the sped stabilization fund. He's accomplished it all within one article, but broken down into 3 pieces. The first piece of the proposed warrant article is to establish a new sped reserve fund under section 13E of the Municipal Modernization Act, for the same purposes as the existing one. The second section is to transfer the existing balance of $250,000 in the 5B fund to the newly established 13E sped stabilization fund. And then section 3 is to terminate the sped stabilization under 5B. He believes that mechanically what we're doing here is completely legal and above board. It's what many communities are doing that have existing 5B stabilization funds. Some that don't are going directly to the MMA language. I did notice a couple things that I needed to correct with him. He was still referencing section 13D. It really is section 13E. I think in the second section where he's talking about transferring from one fund to another, we have to somehow clarify one is the 5B fund and the other one is the 13E, so people understand clearly that we're transferring, because he uses the same terminology for both. He calls it a special education fund. I would like to be crystal clear with our community members on that.
I think I'm sorry, Katie,
Yeah.
also on section 2, it could be misleading, to transfer the existing $250,000 balance in the special ed fund that was established in May 2016. That was in 2 buckets of deposits, wasn't it? It was in May and November town meeting. I read it like it all 250 went in May.
Well, the actual deposit was in November, but it was for I think the reason he put the established in May was he was trying to clarify that it's the 5B fund that exists.
Oh, I see.
Well, maybe he should say
Yeah.
that was established in 2016 and not put May in.
So we established it in May and we funded it in November. There was no money
Right,
put in
right.
in May. I think actually, Jean, your suggestion of just striking the May.
Strike the May.
Yeah.
Again, this language in 2, I wanted to work with him a little bit, because I felt like it wasn't as crystal clear as it needed to be as to where we were moving the money from and to. Because he was using the same term, special education fund, but that's,
Well, MMA doesn't give it any other name.
Yeah, but
I almost want to say, I almost want
Stabilization.
a parenthetical after the first one that says special education fund, parentheses, section 5B, and then that was established in 2006,
16.
in 2016.
But actually, it was the special education stabilization was what we funded,
Right.
and this is now the reserve. I mean,
Yeah.
you could still,
Yeah.
you could,
Call it stabilization.
cause it's called the Special Education Stabilization Fund in our town documents.
But it almost looks like he's changing the name
Right.
in number 2.
Yeah.
Because it says was established, blah, 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 from said stabilization fund to the special education reserve fund. Is that verbiage that's needed because of the,
I don't know, this again, this
yeah,
two,
we need to
the-
check
the-
that.
the two needs to
It needs to be consistent.
the two needs to be reworked,
Because then 3 references again, Special Education Stabilization Fund.
Which is
So
the
it's
proper name.
all over the board
Right.
on what he's calling it,
okay.
so we need to
Okay.
tighten that up.
All right. So my goal is to go back to him and have him, one, make the correction to the right section 13E,
Right.
and then in both 2 and 3, we need to come up with a clear term for the 5B1 that is existing and funded, and a clear term for the new one that's being created under section 13E. And you're right, I didn't catch that, Ellen, that I have what's called in the original warrant article, we'll just go back to that.
Special Education Stabilization Fund.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he dropped stabilization in both those cases.
And then the new one could be Special Education Reserve Fund.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So that was, so step 1 was, to get some draft language that, town council had approved, and we can tweak. Step 2 was to get guidance, from either DESI or DOR regarding the accounting. Senator O'Connor's office has been working on this issue. They actually got clarification from us last week that it's actually DESI that's gonna be giving the informational guidelines, not the DOR. I guess in the case, they can actually choose who's gonna give the guidance. I think DOR is got a lot of informational guidelines it's trying to crank out under MMA, so they kick this over to DESI. Jay Sullivan, who is the Director of School Finance, has a draft. I talked to his office today, he's out on vacation until Monday, but Patrick O'Connor's office would like to set up a conference call, John, for us to ask any questions of Jay Sullivan, so that we can get some kind of personal clarification, and hopefully at that point get from him a clear timeline as to when the formal informational guideline is going to be released. But we can get some clarifying questions answered next week if we choose, which I think is great. My sense from all these conversations is that we're very close to having the informational guidelines released, whether it's February, March, worst case early April. These guidelines are gonna be available to us prior to May town meeting. I don't think that there's any downside in us moving this proposed warrant article forward, because we can always indefinitely postpone it, literally.
meeting.
Literally,
Yeah, at the
literally
meeting.
days before. I've
Right.
talked to Chris Senior, and I've talked to a couple selectmen, and all of them have said, keep on moving it forward. Worst
Yeah.
case, you indefinitely postponed it.
Yep.
And if you have to, it just puts the issue on the radar screen of the rest of the community, and if you have to raise it. So I think that we continue down this path. What I would hope to do is come back to this committee with a slightly more polished version of this, plus
Right.
the information that John and I gather from a call with DESI and around the clear timeline for informational guidelines. But things are moving forward. I mean, we're not the only district that is trying to get this up and running. John shared that Duxbury is trying to, put forth a warrant article.
They have a warrant article
Yeah.
for their annual town meeting, which is about a month from now.
Yeah, so.
And you're pretty confident in the pressure they're feeling to get this out?
They just, no, I don't, it was interesting, cause I honestly didn't expect anybody to pick up the phone when I called Jessie. But they clearly knew that this wasn't a matter of priority,
okay.
and so, again, we'll know more next week, but bottom line, I don't think there's any risk in us moving the language forward on the warrant article, getting it to where we're satisfied, and waiting for the formal guidance to come through.
Yep.
If we have to indefinitely postpone in late April, we will, but, this is something that we've talked about at Board of Selectmen, long-range planning. It's the direction direction we wanna move long-term, so let's get it to the
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
No, that's great.
1 yard line, and if we have to punt till November, we will, but it's not feeling like that, we'll see. When we-
Okay.
Okay.
It is the
John,
government.
John, I have a question. You said is Duxbury moving from a 5B to a 13E?
No, they have nothing right now.
Okay,
They're
so they're-
establishing it from the beginning, and they're gonna start
Okay.
with MMA. They actually had an article for last year and pulled it because this, the new,
Yeah.
the new fund hadn't been established yet.
No, cause if they were moving like we're moving, I'd say we'll grab a copy of their language to compare, but, well, it's not the same.
And I looked at
I
Pam's.
just as an aside, I think the issue isn't so much the article, but the motion that you're gonna make.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of your concerns would be probably best handled in the motion.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Amanda, did you have a question?
I was just wondering if we should concurrently be working on updating the language in the reserve policy. I know the policy, the stabilization policies will stay in effect, but there is the 2% cap with the MMA that
Yeah.
is not yet encapsulated in that reserve policy.
Yep. No, I think that's a good point,
Suggestion.
because
So that's
it's
ready
gonna
to
come
go.
up, it's gonna come up at the Board of Selectmen, it's gonna come up at advisory, when we talk about this warrant article, and it really is just the, I'll go back and reread it, but off the top of my head, it really is that, that ceiling that
Right.
that we need, ceiling language that we need to revise. So it'll no longer be a fixed ceiling of $500,000, it'll be the
2%.
2% of net school spending.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, and just for information, I believe I circulated this a while back, but Senator O'Connor and Representative Machino are scheduled to come to our next meeting on March 1st. So if we have any questions, it would be good to kind of get them ready. They were looking for some information on what we were expecting that conversation to look like. And I gave Jennifer an overview about, the usual items, what the governor's budget might look like. This was a month or so ago, probably.
Give Jennifer.
Jennifer Saritas, because she was the one who's having the conversation
Oh,
to
okay.
schedule that.
Okay.
And they asked her what we were looking for. So I think that it would be good to maybe submit some questions to
Do you-
Jennifer,
Do you want us to
and
send
then
them to?
she and I can talk.
Okay,
Okay?
so we'll send our questions to Jennifer, and then
Right.
you guys can work to
Work to-
collate them and get them off
exactly.
to, okay.
Exactly. Okay? All right, report from subcommittees of school committee. Yes.
Two quick things. So tomorrow, I'm gonna meet with, Deb Keneally, and she's gonna give, myself, an update around the safe harbor. It was originally Ellen and myself, but I'm just gonna take the meeting so that there's an update to the school committee liaisons around safe harbor. My biggest question is getting an update around the grant that they've, resubmitted. They submitted the federal grant last year. We were not awarded that grant. It's not typically awarded in the first application cycle, so we're applying again. So I'm curious to get a little bit more detail on that. And I'm also curious to get an update around what kind of spring programming they have in mind. So I'll update folks on that. And then Master Plan Committee is having its second meeting next Tuesday during February break. We're still kind of working on the basics of what we want to do as a committee. We've all taken assignments to go back and look at master plans for like communities on the South and North Shore. I was thinking a little bit about a conversation that we had a while back at school committee, which was around space considerations for parking and security, and I didn't have a really great response as to what committee or who we should be having conversations with about it, but the more I read these master plans, I actually think that those kind of conversations in terms of reconfiguring our facilities layout probably best belong with master planning. we had thought, well, maybe is it long-range planning? I actually think if it's gonna go anywhere, master plan might be that place. 'Cause there's, I mean, conversations like where we park the buses, or, how are we gonna do anything to reconfigure DPW? It's not really, master plan isn't meant to be a conversation about department needs, but department needs are factored into the bigger, service conversation, and how is our community gonna look. So if there's, it was just one kind of thing that, as I was reading through some of these plans, it may find a home there. But my role on this is really not to advocate for schools, it's to be a, link back to the schools, but more as a kind of a community representative, so we'll see where it goes.
Other?
I just had a question, just related to the capital budget meeting, questions, just in terms of the security questions. Have we circled those, with Brian Joyce or, Cohasset Police Department, just to have them weigh in on the answers, or?
On the capital budget.
Yes. The questions were just rather technical, so I didn't know.
We are going back to them on the 27th.
Right.
Back on the 27th.
Right.
I've called Brian Joyce and sent him an email asking him to get back to me about the film, because
Okay.
you go to the current 3M site, there's three different grades of film, different
Right.
than the cut sheet that we originally provided.
Mhm.
So I'll follow up with Brian, and actually I hadn't even thought about contacting him real quickly, but.
Well,
Yeah.
Well,
I
we
think that
can-
was all
Bill or
done in
Jay?
executive session, so I think that that's probably been answered privately.
Yeah.
Well,
As far as the film is concerned, that was done in executive session with them.
right, well, I think it was questions 12 and 13 on the capital budget list. I could circulate those questions to the CPD, cause I think they're in the best position to answer those.
Cause I look at that list that they sent us, and I think it was 16 questions or whatever was on it, like, they're literally expecting an answer
They
for
want
each,
detail for each of those
questions, so we have to, some of them required CPD input, specifically.
Or some technical expertise that
Yeah.
we don't have.
Right.
Yeah, because it was nice to see that they only had questions on digital learning and, the security request, but the reason they put together that list was for us literally to come back with point by point responses, so I think we need to make sure that we've gathered that before the 27th.
So, we'll handle, Amanda and I, with CPD, the questions that relate to them, because they weren't all for Brian. And I'll copy you guys in.
While we're reporting on committees, I've completed and submitted today an additional request from the Community Preservation Committee, Commission, for Deer Hill. The estimate, actually the bid, the potential bid, has come up higher than I anticipated at $61,400 and some odd money. So I put in a call to 15,000 of that is in equipment for Deer Hill. The rest is basically labor, construction, all of that stuff. I have a concern, and I have a call into Thomas Joyce, I believe it's Tom Joyce, who's the executive director at the Architectural Board. He was my first contact with them. The complaint states that we need path and access to equipment. What I really need to know is it just access or is it equipment? And although it says access, if we comply with that at this point, will they come back and then complain about the equipment? So I really need to know exactly what the expense is, but I did fulfill the application for that with them. The last meeting of the CPC is this Tuesday. I'm first on the agenda for that piece. I'm also working not only with Nancy White, but with another contact that we have, because Russ has also said to me that unless we have an itemized cost for Osgood, we will have to wait a year. So I need that for Tuesday. I was in contact with someone today who will walk the area with me tomorrow meet with some of the committee and we'll draw up a plan and cost for that potentially. So we're moving in some direction. I'm not sure whether the fundraising committee will wanna stay with Nancy White as we have now, or she will have a capacity within a project manager or a contractor, but I should have a definitive answer by Tuesday.
So
And also an estimation, but my guess is that 190,000 is probably an accurate number for Osgood. The teachers at Osgood have also asked the second grade teachers to met with me, well, actually, it was a kindergarten, first and second grade committee. They also wanted to do some fundraising in memory of Laura Keating, to have an outdoor classroom toward the back of the building, which would be an expanse from the playground. My concern was that we were tapping the same funding, so we are combining forces.
Yes.
So that's where that is going, and what we planned out together is that they will have, they will have the freedom to design, locate, stipulate what that outside classroom will look like, and work with gardeners and, landscapers as to what they want that to look like, but the funding needs to be combined. We didn't wanna tug one against another. And that's moving forward as well.
So Louise, on the Deer Hill request going to CPC, we have $50,000 into capital budget as a request.
And they've asked that I look at the contract for that as well. And they also mentioned at that time, when we met with them, have I gone to CPC for this? So I went ahead and did that, so that the next time when we meet with them on the 27th, it will not appear as our priority. It will appear as going with the CPC who have the money. So it
Okay.
would be in that pocket. Also, they asked that I look at the contract, which I finally located, which is not in this building, which is not with Ted Carroll, but was with Brian Joyce. So, I did find the invoice, and at the bottom of the invoice is the disclaimer. It says that the playground at Deer Hill is compliant to the federal guidelines for ADA, and to please check your local ADA. So, I do have that document for them, but although it did go to capital, I felt that since one was going to CPC, the other one should as well. It's gone back and forth.
It has.
Initially, the town thought it had free cash, and then Ted Carroll was going to handle all playgrounds, and then it was in a talking stage, and it's become so confusing. It was easier to streamline it and work with Russ, so.
The only issue that I will flag for us is that, and this is why I circulated the CPC funding, is that CPC funding, I think the current balance in that account is, at least for recreation and open space, is relatively small. With the anticipated receipts, I think it got to like $115,000. That's not to say that they can't transfer from the general fund to get to the $250,000, the $190 and the $60 for Deer Hill. The only tension that I'll mention is that they are trying to not deplete too much the general fund, because the general fund could be used for the historic section of the old town hall. So, again, I don't know how this is all gonna sort out. I appreciate you taking both requests to CBC, cause we've had a good dialogue with them. We'll see where they shake out in terms of requests for open space in general. I think the only other one that had been teed up was a relatively small one for Milliken Field from, the baseball. But my bigger concern was how much, when CPC finally gets down to deliberating, how much are they going to feel comfortable transferring out of the general fund into the open space to accommodate this, and they may get there, they may not. I think the only competing thing is the town hall.
Right. The request came from Russ,
Yeah.
because we were talking about both playgrounds.
Yeah.
And it could have been bundled as two, as
Yeah.
one, and his request was to put it to separate, because I'm very optimistic on the fundraising to really cover more of the 60,000 at 190. They're doing such a spectacular job.
There are two different projects.
One has added funding, Deer Hill does not. We don't go back to the well for
Right.
fixing something that didn't work, or I don't.
Can I ask one question? The 15,000, is that for accessible equipment?
Yes,
Okay.
it's for a, multi-person swing
Mhm.
and a couple of other things.
Okay.
Xylophone.
Okay.
So if your contact comes back at the architectural board and says it's only access, then the 15,000 comes off the 61.
Right.
Okay.
Also think that's high. I'm being a Pollyanna, I just think that it wasn't what I was told.
So do we-
And I always go to a wait a minute. So,
Do we know where the funds for, Beechwood and the library are gonna come from?
Ted said he has the funding within his
Really?
money form, I don't know. I am so myopic in just taking care of these two that
Okay.
I'm letting Ted take care of the rest.
Okay. Well, the only surprise I don't wanna have happen is
Correct.
that they also come
Correct.
to CPC.
Well, the last meeting of CPC for the year is Tuesday.
Okay,
After that, they're done for the year.
okay, well, that's good. Closing the window on request is the big
Right.
thing.
That's what they're looking for.
Yep. Okay. That's great.
All right, so I went to the Alternative Energy Committee meeting on Monday night, and there was a discussion of the next grant application for 2017, and I believe that amount is somewhere in the vicinity of $250,000. They're working on updating priorities and plans, preparations, timelines, et cetera, for the grant application. It's due in March, but I guess there's not a two-way conversation going on currently. So the chairperson of that committee of AEC is working with another member to try and get some responses on that. There was an update on the electric vehicle and charging station
Night.
initiative. Night. The town still doesn't have the charging station in place, although they have some of the work done to prep for it. It's going in right in the middle of where a snowbank is, so they can't get to it. But they have done the concrete pad, and they do have the place for it. It was a little bit more expensive than they had originally planned, because they decided to purchase a smart installation, which will do some tracking and speak to, not fuel use per se, cause it's electric, but how that's being expended. The status of the old landfill, they're working feverishly, to get everything up to date that they can, so that they can continue with that process. If they hadn't started construction at a certain time, then we kind of would have been out of the loop, so that's moving forward.
You mean for the solar?
Yeah, for the solar arrays
array.
in the cap landfill. Streetlight procurement and conversion. We are now the proud owners of somewhere in the vicinity of 511 phone poles. Not phone poles, but streetlight poles. So we're working on figuring out what type of lights to put on, because we do have to convert it to more smart energy. Let's see, transitioning. This other stuff really isn't applicable.
On the grant application that's due in March,
Mm-hmm.
what they submit in terms of projects under that, are we committed to do those? I guess what I'm confused about is,
We're committed to moving forward for a 20% savings
Yeah.
over, I think it's 5 years, but I could be wrong.
okay, and
So
that's to keep our green community safe,
exactly,
okay.
to keep the status going and
Okay.
to qualify for the funds.
Yep,
So much of what we got in that first grant benefited the schools
yep,
in one way or another.
yep.
And that will continue, because it's the biggest asset and,
I guess I still go back to, it would be nice to know what those
what
projects.
the plans are,
What the
exactly,
projects are,
exactly.
especially if they're impacting.
Yep, and I
the
did not
windows.
address that, for exactly what's on there because they're still trying to figure it out themselves.
It's just
You know,
gonna come
the-
up at Capitol again as
Yeah.
to whether, if you're touching the windows,
Right.
does that impact
Right,
the capital request?
right. I don't, yeah,
That group,
yep, I get it,
yeah,
I get it. So we have to figure that out.
Yep.
And then I also went to the Osgood School Council meeting, which, was, let's see, the principal was, interestingly enough, at the allergy meeting when we all arrived. And came flying in, so Alex Sullivan very nicely, sent something around about what we had discussed, and they're working on school climate, some curriculum initiatives which have involved observations in another school district, which is kind of exciting. We talked a little bit about kindergarten registration and how well that's going. Working on technology and developing acceptable use policies for the elementary schools.
what does that mean, translating our existing acceptable use language to a kindergarten first grader?
Yeah.
Yeah, what
Yes.
I had shown them was that there's
Yes.
a way, there's a form that would be more kid-friendly.
Right.
Okay.
So that they would understand what their
Right.
responsibilities are, and not the long document.
Maybe
that
like
makes-
pictures as prompts
Yes,
for,
exactly.
this, the right way, the wrong way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't necessarily be a policy, but would be
Right.
a,
But they're
protocol,
developing, yes,
in the
right,
policy.
right. A user agreement, but,
right,
Okay.
the
A kid-friendly
kids
one.
can sign.
right.
Put their
With
X.
thumbprint or something.
And, they're,
A little handshake.
they're working on their PBS. I gave a little bit of an overview for them on the school budget and how it's built. And explained the stabilization fund and the Municipal Modernization Act, which there were some questions on. And the concept of our goal of trying to do more with what we have, basically. And then the next meeting will be on March 2nd. I think that's, I went to the capital budget meeting, but it's all running amok in my head right now. Too many meetings.
Did anybody get to the PBIS parent overview? The original one, I had a conflict, and then when it got rescheduled, I forget what my excuse was. I think it was too many I think it was meeting fatigue that week.
Or hadn't shoveled out.
Exactly.
It's postponed, I think what Lisa said was 9 parents.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Okay,
Wasn't a great attendance,
Oh.
but,
It was the first day of that week after the,
correct, it was active.
kind of a crazy.
Was there any handouts that,
I did not get that far.
Okay.
I have not met with any of them since
Okay.
then. We had that mini vacation of
Yeah.
snow. So,
I mean, if there were handouts, since I didn't get a chance to go, if there were any handouts, if you don't mind circulating, if there wasn't, that's fine. I mean,
you're welcome to email Jennifer
Okay.
Kara and ask her for any of those. I would imagine she'd have them electronically.
Okay, great. I'll do that.
any other reports? No? Okay, then we will move on to the approval of the minutes, and people have already left. So for the minutes of Wednesday, January 11th, 2017, I have a couple of things. At the bottom of page 2, it says athletic update, if we could say athletic financial update for fall sports. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down. Mr. Ford reviewed the many improvements that have been made to the program. If we could change that to facilities and equipment instead of program, including new lights at Alumni Field, painting of locker rooms, new baseball equipment, et cetera. And then under superintendent's report, about halfway down, in the sentence that starts after the $30,000, I don't know if you're looking at it. They are not sure where the funds will come for the Deer Hill Playground. That should be from, just a little typo. Does anybody else have any notes?
I think in the next sentence, I believe I was referring to Deer Hill, not Osgood.
In the next sentence.
Mrs. Dugan stated they were trying to resolve Osgood, we already know where it's coming from. I believe we're talking about the Deer Hill playground with Chris Senior.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's,
I saw that somewhere else too, but I can't remember where it was.
Right up above, is that supposed to be it? It's like 2 lines above that one. Under the, like halfway down.
Osgood Playground, the CPC has been working with administration, PSO.
that one's correct, that makes
That
sense.
That's right.
That was,
Yeah.
that was the Osgood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Too many playgrounds. Fixes.
Okay, I think that's it. I think that's, I just didn't note it, and I swear. So is that everything?
Yep.
Okay, so could I have a motion to approve the minutes of the Cohasset School Committee meeting on January 11th, 2017?
So moved.
And second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. And are there any follow-ups or updates? No. Give us a list this time. So, all that said, we do have a reason to enter executive session for the purpose of exemption number 3, strategy related to negotiation with union personnel bus drivers. And we will reconvene in public session to adjourn. Do I have a motion to enter executive session?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second,
All in favor, roll call please.
I, Barbara second.
I, Kitty Dugan.
Aye, Gina Stino.
Hi, Eleanor.